Tony. We are in France, of course, where thousands and thousands, tens of thousands of British troops joined Allied nations storming the beaches of Normandy.
D-Day opened the long-awaited second front, of course, helping to liberate France from Nazi rule. So joining us now is our presenter, Ellie. Well, Ellie has been working incredibly hard over in Normandy. We're going to give Ellie a few more minutes off while Cameron stays with us now here. I mean, this isn't just a commemoration, is it, of the history, Cameron? It's very much a royal event.
Yeah, it absolutely is, because, as we said earlier, the King, and by extension the royal family, has an incredibly important relationship with the armed forces. The King is Colonel-in-Chief, the head of the armed forces, so he knows the sacrifices that these people make. And his grandfather, of course, was monarch during World War II, and he spoke of his grandfather's frustration that he couldn't go across to Normandy on D-Day itself because it was far too dangerous. The British government wouldn't let him. Similarly with Churchill as well. But what he would have done is heard the stories from his grandfather and also his mother, Queen Elizabeth II, of wartime. And I think the King,
because she drove ambulances during the war.
She did.
She was in the women's voluntary service, and she was with her sister drove ambulances.
Yeah, women's auxiliary service.
Auxiliary, yeah.
Yes, she did. So he would have known all of that. And I think we saw a couple of days ago the King invited 4 D-Day veterans to Buckingham Palace with the Queen, and they showed him their memories and little mementos. One of them had a pair of lucky football boots that he tied to his backpack as he stormed the beaches to try and keep him alive, and he was very lucky and did. Another one had his dog tag, which still had blood stains on. When he was shot in the lung on D-Day, he was saved by his friends that day. His friend was killed the following day.
Amazing.
So the King and the Queen heard all these harrowing stories. And I think with all of that in mind, when we saw them yesterday in Portsmouth, I think the emotion perhaps overwhelmed the Queen, as we've seen on the front pages this morning. The King looked visibly moved as well. He gave a very heartfelt speech. But today, of course, is actually in Normandy on D-Day. It's a very formal event. The King is sat next to President Emmanuel Macron of France at the Royal British Legion's commemorative event. He's patron of the Royal British Legion and the Normandy Memorial Trust. Memorial Trust. The Queen is also there. If you're watching on television, you're seeing live pictures of the Prime Minister of Canada, Trudeau, as well as the Prime Minister of France as well, and you can just see behind Trudeau there Prince William as well, greeting Canadian D-Day veterans, because of course 12 countries around the world fought for the Allies during World War II on D-Day. Canada, as a Commonwealth country, incredibly important factor in that, on Juno Beach and specifically, and this is where the commemorative event is taking place, because Prince William, of course, future King of not only the United Kingdom but also Canada, so it will be very important for him to meet the veterans of D-Day, yes, but also the young cadets who are helping out this event.
And the King and the Queen during the war, Cameron, were incredibly important part of it, because there was a suggestion that the Queen and her children, which had been Princess Margaret and the future Queen, should be moved to Canada, to live in Canada during the war to protect them. And she said, I go where my husband goes. So she stayed in Britain. They stayed in Buckingham Palace. Buckingham Palace took bombs during the Blitz. There was the famous moment when she went to the East End and said, I can now look you in the eye, because the palace had taken bombs too. And the King's broadcasts, and we all know from the King's speech, that very moving film, that he struggled with those broadcasts, but they were incredibly important to keep the British morale going.
They absolutely were, and the King did eventually go and visit the Normandy beaches around 10 days after D-Day, but also he was used, according to a documentary which has come out recently, the King was used by the British government to try and deceive the Germans into thinking that the D-Day landings wouldn't be happening in Normandy at all, but instead they'd happen in Calais or Scandinavia. So the King was sent to the southeast of England to visit British troops to try and trick the Germans into thinking it was going to land in Calais, drawing Germans away from Normandy to give perhaps them a bit more of a clear run on D-Day itself. And ultimately it was successful, that invasion and the Battle of Normandy.
OK, thank you, Cameron.